It's that time again.
Yep. We are Team Wester.
And you are the most important thing to us.
Team Wester
Podcast. It's all about the team.
Welcome back to another edition of the Team Wester podcast. I'm Brad Gelber, and today we're actually in a very special episode of the podcast. We're in the actual headquarters, I guess you would call it, of Oxford Pennant. I'm joined today by Dave Horesh, who's one of the co-founders of Oxford. Thanks for joining us, Dave.
Brad, thank you.
So I guess I want to start off a little bit by just talking about you before we get to Oxford Pennant, because I'm sure a lot of people watching this, listening to this may know Oxford Pennant, but they might not know the folks behind Oxford Pennant. So tell us a little bit about who you are, where'd you come from, and just a little bit about Dave.
Sure. I'm not from Buffalo. I was born in Rochester. I was born in Pittsford, so I grew up, about a mile from where the Bills do training camp in the summer. And I have a background in, I've always been involved in manufacturing in some capacity. So when I was a kid, I worked at my local screen printing shop, folding T-shirts and cleaning squeegees and stuff like that. Then I went off to college at UB, met my wife, and that's the reason that I live in Buffalo. But I have always, I've always really liked the manufacturing heritage of both Rochester and Buffalo. I was always drawn to it, even, unknowingly when I was a kid, just, folding T-shirts for $10 an hour sounded pretty good. Actually, it was like $7 an hour,
right.
But I'm that old. Sounded good to me back in the day. But when I graduated from UB, I started working in offset printing. And I was doing outside sales I always call it outside sales for manufactured products, right? And I have a BA in psychology. And so I liked working in sales for manufactured products because it made me sound smart.
Right.
And, I could talk about things and be like, yes, the build of that particular product is 1.4 inches off. So, I've always been drawn to, like the creativity and manufacturing combined. And I'm also a partner at a marketing agency here in town called Block Club. And I wasn't always a partner when I was still working at the company as an employee. I actually ended up training Brett as a temp. Yep. And Brett and I bonded with one another and became fast friends. And about 3 months after we met, we started Oxford Pennant.
Yeah. So I was doing a little bit of reading up on kind of the history of Oxford Pennant before the podcast. I just wanted to make sure I was knowledgeable to ask the right questions. But, that's kind of a unique thing, I think, the fact that you and Brett kind of found each other and the fact that you kind of hit it off quickly. But then it sounded like, from what I read, you guys kind of shared a passion for perhaps pennants or kind of, like you said, the history of this stuff, because it kind of helped form Oxford Pennant. So I guess maybe talk a little bit about where Oxford Pennant came from, because, it's kind of a unique business in itself. So how did it start? Where did it come from? And also, where's the name come from?
All right. When Brett and I first met, the first thing, so we were working for a company that's now gone called City Dining Cards. And the car so backing up, Brett started on a Monday, and on Tuesday, as part of his training, we had to go to Boston together.
Yep.
And we had these 2010 Fiat 500s, which are, I think, from you to me right now, is about the whole size of the car. Yeah. So Brett and I were shoulder to shoulder in this car, and we always joked that by the end of that trip, we were going to be best friends or worst enemies.
Right.
And ended up spending a lot of time in that car talking a lot about creativity. And I might have been, what am I now? I'm 37 now, and it's 11 years. I was 26, and Brett's the same age as me, so we were both 26, and we were kind of in the car talking. We're like, you sort of have the high school creativity where you're like, I'm going to design a poster and paint a thing and have a show or whatever. But then there's that post-grad creativity where it's like, this either needs to latch onto something. Sure. Otherwise, I'm going to end up working at an insurance agency, with all due respect to working in insurance agencies, right? But as a creative person, you want to find a way to be able to use your own creativity to build a life for yourself. Yep. And so on this trip, we were experimenting with, ways that we could keep some sort of creative spark alive as we transitioned into a new phase of our life, right? We both had girlfriends, I was getting ready to propose to my wife, my now wife, and, just wondering what direction things are going to pull you in. So on this trip, we really bonded in the car talking about creativity and mostly music, honestly. We were both just interested in trying something together. And I think the original idea for Oxford was to make a couple of pennants that said, let's go Buffalo. Yep. I mean, this is the business idea.
Right.
Let's go Buffalo pennants, take them to festivals, make a few $100, take that few $100 to the bar, leave it at the bar and go home, and do it all over again the next week. But what happened was like we started this company at the same time that Instagram was on the come up. Believe it or not, there was a time when people really weren't using Instagram.
2013.
Yeah,
there,
that's right. It was really mostly like a photo filtering app at the time. And so we just decided to start taking pictures of the product. And once we introduced that Let's Go Buffalo pennant, people started reaching out to us and saying like, these are really interesting. Can you make these with my town's name or my kid's name, my dog's name or whatever? We're like, sure, whatever. So we just kept taking photos of whatever we were making and posting them. And the company just kind of like, people are downloading this app and what's it all about? And businesses are figuring it all out. And we just happened to be, I think, one of the first cohort of businesses, especially in Buffalo, to have an Instagram account that was like, we're a company. We make these things. You've never heard of us before.
Right.
And, truth be told, Buffalo as a community, I don't think this business would have ever caught on if we were in a bigger town. Right. But Buffalo as a community, I think really got excited about the idea that there was this new company that was making something that wasn't, a t-shirt or a hat or something that's familiar, something unusual. So I put my manufacturing background to work and figured out how to make the product, and Brett just kept designing and I kept selling, and the company just kind of caught on with its own momentum. So you asked where the name came from. Christmas Day 2013, I was registering the domain name for the company with my now wife, and Brett and I had these terrible business names.
You know one offhand.
Yeah, just like, yes, I do.
Let's hear it.
I'm not telling you.
All right, fair enough. We'll keep it a secret.
And Buffalo Pennant or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there with my wife, and she goes, why don't you name it after the dog? Because I have this little, he's still alive, he's 14. But I have this dachshund mix that he's just like, he never barks. You meet him and he sits in your lap and he's quiet. And everyone loved him. And so she goes, name it after the dog. And I'm like, name it after the dog. So I texted Brett and I'm like, what about Oxford Pennant? I think Brett's actual response was like, I don't care. Sure. This isn't going anywhere. So sure. And I liked it because, it was obviously sentimental to me, but it also had this air of like a classic pennant company, a classic manufacturing, vintage product.
Right.
And so it just stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Cause when you hear it now, I think like it almost makes sense. Like you think like, oh, like that must've been really well thought through and strategized. And instead it's like my dog.
I just like threw it into GoDaddy and started a business.
Yeah. That's awesome though. So obviously, we just talked a little bit about, Instagram. Cause I read that was something I think that the timing of that, like you mentioned, helped out. But in terms of Pennants itself, like, it's not maybe something as common nowadays, or you see it, if you do, it's not as well made maybe as what you guys have kind of aspired to be. So was that something that early on you guys were like, well, the differentiator for us maybe is that we have the superior product compared to the stuff coming over from overseas and things like that?
Yeah. I think, when we are thinking about this product, I think Brett and I hold the company to a really high standard. Sure. And, sometimes you do things for money, right? Sometimes you make a thing and you're like, whatever, I don't really care about it. But for the most part, with the brand, we've always tried to take this market position that, so there's actually better to answer this question by giving you some history of the product. Sure. So the product was originally made in the late 19th century. And it's the cliche that you think about. It's like the Harvard and Yale football game, and you get the pennant that was in the bucket and you wave it around, and then Yale loses and you throw it on the ground and you go home. And, so it was actually the first piece of sports merchandise. So I would say for the first 3 decades that the product was even around, it was usually made by hand. It was cut and sewn by hand, usually as a piece of folk art. Sure. And then in the 30s and 40s, screen printing came into vogue, I guess. And the pennant was the first item to ever be screen printed. And so these old pennant manufacturers had this, blend of rayon and wool that they were using. And they were screen printing on these pennants, and it had that kind of soft, supple, you hold it up and it flops over, and that's that. So I don't know exactly what the dates are, but from the 30s to the 40s to about the late 60s, early 70s, they were made that way. And then, as with a lot of things in the 70s, people started to value engineer it, right? The company started looking into new ways to make it for cheaper, faster, and whatever. And so, in fact, there was a pennant company in Buffalo. It was called Trench Manufacturing. They were around for 100 years. Wow. And they closed in the early 90s. And they were doing a process called dye sublimation. Yep. So dye sub on a synthetic pennant, it's the pennant that you've probably seen at vintage shops or whatever. It's like a Frisbee. You can just it's just throw it through the air and it just It just flies because it's
Right.
all flat and whatever. And it's they were making them. I mean, to make one of them now is still a nickel.
Right.
In 2024,
Right.
it's still a nickel to make one. So you can imagine what it cost in the 90s. And so I think what Brett and I noticed when we were starting the company was that that golden age of like the cut and sew up to like where they were screen printing is the best. And so if you look at the average Oxford Pennant product, we use the same material blend, the same rayon and wool blend. They still make it.
Right.
And we source it out of a mill in Illinois. And we try to make sure that the product is designed in a way that is adherent to the way that it might have been, even though you're using computers and modern technology.
Right.
A one color print looks awesome.
Right.
So why change that?
Right.
If you go to our site and if anybody that's watching this has a Let's Go Buffalo pennant, what's wrong with that product?
Right.
It's a perfect product. It does. You have nothing else to prove.
Sure.
And so it's a long answer to a short question, but we always say that the best it was ever made was 20 years before we were born.
Sure.
So why would we ever change that?
Right. So in terms of the business as a whole, though, too, it started off, like you said, kind of like a side project, an idea, like we'll make some beer money or whatever, it's a fun idea. You guys maybe didn't think in the beginning, like there was much to it, but when did it kind of hit you like, okay, you know what, like this is an actual business, maybe not to the point we're at now, but a business that could be your focus kind of for your guys' career at that point?
Well, there's the story that I tell most people, and then there's the real story. The real story is that I usually talk about, so we won this big business pitch competition.
North, right?
Yeah, the Ignite Buffalo competition. And we were one of 3 top winners, and we got $100,000 check and turned it into everything that you see here. All the cutting and sewing and printing and fulfillment. That $100,000 check, which was meant to incubate a small business, became added tons and tons of value to this company. So I'll give you a tour later. You can see it.
Yeah.
But there were 2 moments where I realized that we had a thing.
Yeah.
And again, going back to what I was just talking about with the quality of the product, the first time that we had them made, we did the research to find out what's the best place, to get the material from. Yep. Let's get them screen printed in this way. But I was in an apartment that I was paying like $300 a month for, and I don't know how to sew, and I don't have screen printing equipment. So I got all this stuff made up, and I'm like, the box showed up from the felt goes to this guy, and the printing goes to that company, and then this woman's gonna sew it for you, and it all goes in the blender, and the box shows up, and you're like, And I remember I was with my roommate, box cutter, open up the box, I opened them, and I saw the Let's Go Buffalo pennants, and I started laughing because I was like, this is gonna work.
Yeah.
This is exactly what I wanted.
Right.
And I called, Brett came over and we looked at them together, and we were both like, I mean, if there's a market for it, we did it right.
Right.
So there was that. And that part of the story is, I'll never forget the moment. I remember it was on this island in my kitchen. I remember exactly where I was standing when I was like, the product is good. Right. When I knew that the business was good, this guy who runs a now defunct brand reached out to us on Instagram, and he's like, I'm working with this college. They want to get pennants made. Can you make 2,000 of them? I'm like, oh yeah, of course. No problem. Give me 4 weeks and I'll get them done for you. And then I hung up, and I'm like, how the hell am I going to make 2,000 pennants?
What before that? What was the most you had ever made? For
A couple dozen.
Yeah.
25 maybe. And I was pretty happy with that.
Yeah.
But then that side of the business came together, and you got to you have to pay for those. Somebody has to make those. You have to pay for the equipment. Right. And we just threw the money on our credit cards, and it was it maxed out my credit card.
Right.
I'm 26. My credit card has like $1,000 on it.
Right.
So Brett and I threw all of our money on both of our credit cards and got this order done. We baked in some profit, and it was I remember at the time, I think we made like $4,000 on the order. Now remember, my credit card limit was $1,000, so I made 4 times my credit card limit. And the check showed up, and I called Brett, and I'm like, let's go drinking. Let's go get a beer. So the beer money thing still made sense. But it was at that point where I was like, well, why couldn't we do anything?
Right.
If there's a market for this product, the only barrier here is money. And now we've got a little bit of it, so let's just keep doubling down.
Right.
And so Brett and I never took a profit from the company for the first 3 years.
Yeah.
Just kept on keeping the money in it so that we could afford to finance these opportunities.
So fast forward to today and, the size of the company and the business. Give us a little bit of a perspective, like how many employees do you have and kind of what all that goes into, the space at Oxford now? Yeah.
Well, it's manufacturing. So the employee count goes up and down, just people come for a couple months and they leave or whatever. Throughout 2023, we carried over 55 employees all year. At our peak, we had 63. The company, we had our best year, revenue-wise, we had our best year ever, which was close to just shy of $6 million in sales last year. Wow. And much of the investments that we've made in manufacturing have been in, volume manufacturing. Sure. So there's kind of two things that we do. We've got the volume manufacturing side of the business where somebody calls and orders 5,000 things. We're like, no problem, we got that. The other side is like customization and the personalization of the product. Mm-hmm. So we've invested in technology to be able to go. You can go to our site now and you can type in whatever you want, and we'll make a pennant for you and ship it. So the growth of the company has been it's sort of like high margin, low volume business, and then like low margin, high volume business. Right. And in that way, we feel like we can capture the entire market. Yeah. Whatever the pennant market looks like in the world. But a lot of that growth has also come through our licensing opportunities. Yep. So we recently picked up the NHL license. Later this year, we're going to be announcing some products for Disney, which we're very excited about.
Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. So we've really, I mentioned that best year by revenue. We still, this is our 11th year right now, we still take on an investment mindset, right? So it's pretty unusual for us to just pull profits from the company and go on a trip. Right. Although it's starting to sound pretty nice.
Yeah, when you look outside.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But if you take a look at our manufacturing facility, we have over $1 million of equipment to make a $20 felt, $25 felt flag. So we're excited because we spent so much time building out that manufacturing flywheel, and then by adding on these licenses, hopefully you add volume to it. So you kind of have this business where you've got you can make lots and lots of something, and it's really expensive to do that if the only way to do it is like 1,000 people working on 1,000 things on one day. Right. But if you can have a couple dozen people working on it and still have the same output because of technology, hopefully the company is primed to do even more than what I just told you.
Right. And, I want to get to Buffalo specifically in a minute because I think that's kind of a unique part of your story and the company's story. But in terms of, other relationships you guys have, just looking and doing some reading, just name some different relationships you've had: the Jordan brand, Adidas, Shopify, the Goo Goo Dolls, Wilco, My Chemical Romance, Capital One, Gibson, J. Crew, Sesame Street. I mean, you hear some of these names and it's maybe to you even still like a little bit of like a holy crap kind of feeling. I don't know for you still, I can't speak for you, but are there any of those relationships or things that have kind of stuck out that made you feel like it took you guys to another level, like the first of those, or was it kind of just all in stride over time? Because, like I said, those are some pretty big names that you've worked with.
Yeah. I think what's interesting is, I don't want to sound like I'm not grateful for it. Right. But I think what's interesting is that when I was just a little baby pennant boy lying in bed at night dreaming about what this company might become, you think about like all these things that could come up in the email. You see the domain name on the email addresses, and you're like, oh my God, it's Adidas, right? And so those moments, those are, you still get excited by them. But what I just described to you in terms of the manufacturing apparatus that we built, now we need that, right? And so now the company is, you sort of can't be like, well, gee shucks, guys, it's Nike. Right. You sort of like, all right, that's great. We are of a caliber where Nike knows that they can get a quality product from us, and we expect that order at this point. Right? We expect to be great, and we expect to be one of the best pennant companies in the world, of which there's only a handful. So there are moments where it's interesting because I think you would think that the glory would come from like I said, the domain name. Right. Where it really comes from is, for me, I don't know, I can't speak for all 50 plus employees at the company. Instagram gives you a window into people's worlds. And to some extent, the other social media platforms do as well, but Instagram is still our top dog. And, on Christmas morning, I tend to open up Instagram and I'm like, this is kind of like an extra Christmas for me because I see all the tagged photos. And you start to see, grandparents getting a custom flag that's framed from their grandkids. And you see new parents announcing that they're having a baby with an Oxford pennant. And people at weddings, you know, the best day of their lives, holding these up with their entire wedding party.
Right.
We're gonna make you one, by the way.
No, thank you.
Those are still the moments to me where it verifies that what we've built is still resonant with people, because like it has to resonate with people in order for the big company to be like, we're going to invest in this because we want some of that action.
Right.
And so when you have a product that makes its way into people's, I'm not just going to say story, their narrative, right? Their whole life, right? Where to think that in the year 2060, they'll open up the box from their wedding and there's like the, you know, the dried corsage, the invitation, the dress, and the pennant.
Right.
Those are the moments to me where I'm like, we still got it, right? Because I still want to drive a company forward that makes people feel something. And I feel very, very lucky that we've been given that opportunity, because I don't think all companies can make people feel something.
Yeah, that's really cool. No, that's a good response, because I think you would think, like you mentioned the names, but I think if you can make a difference in someone's life, like it's hard to beat that, I think.
And, you know, for whatever it's worth to you too, I don't know, you know, again, I don't know how much of our story you know, but like that impact on people's personal lives, I think this company has a lot of swagger, right? And I think we've got a lot of like Buffalo swagger in particular. We have a funny company plow, you know, but when you look at the different activations that we've done, you know, we gave away a trip to Buffalo, which you may be familiar with.
I remember that. So,
A few years ago, we gave away a trip to Buffalo, but we forced the winner to come in the middle of winter. Like you had to redeem the trip by like March 15th.
Right.
We had the pennants on top of the tower during COVID when the Bills were in their playoff run. And we also, like with the plow, I mean, there are times where I'll still just hop on Twitter and be like, does anybody need, you know, there's been a storm, does anybody need a plow? And I heard you do too.
Yeah.
Heard your street's a mess.
Yeah.
But you know, that impact of the product, I think the impact of the brand, we still push that forward because we want people to see the Buffalo trip and be like, a trip to Buffalo in the middle of winter. Right. Like we're the only ones that want to be here. Why would anybody even enter that?
Right.
But you want to make people like, as a sort of a born marketer, both myself and Brett, we think about things in terms of how they, you know, if you can make people smile, we always say conversation is currency. And as long as you're in the conversation, something good will happen to your business, even if you can't draw a direct line to it.
Sure. And, you know, speaking of Buffalo, it's like a perfect transition because, you know, as you said, maybe Buffalo's not always thought of as like the place you want to be as a business, as someone that's living here. It's not, you know, we don't always have the most positive connotation, although they've, you know, last decade or so, it's maybe started to come around a bit here. But in terms of Buffalo specifically, you know, I was reading kind of when you guys won the competition, you had mentioned something they had taken into consideration was, well, are you guys going to be able to like stay in Buffalo? And if we're going to invest in this company, you know, to grow here. So what was it about, you know, I guess Buffalo that you guys decided like, yes, like not only do we want to be in Buffalo, but we want to make it literally part of our DNA as a company? Because as you said, you guys have not just stayed here, but you've like embraced being in Buffalo.
What is it about Buffalo?
Yeah.
When
I guess especially for you maybe because you're not originally from here.
Yeah. We're moving. I'm kidding. Wait. Don't edit that out. You know, I'm answering personally.
Sure.
I represent Brett as well. And that's a big part of, you know, our thinking. And Brett's from Buffalo.
Right.
Brett's from Cheektowaga. I think that there's really probably two answers to that question. Yeah. The first is that we never would have taken root were we in any other market. And I really believe that. And that's a result of like real estate prices or like just the amount of, you know, static out there, right? If you're in a city like New York and you're like, we have a little pennant flag that says, let's go New York.
Right.
Like, buy, you know, cute kiddo, see at the, you know, summer markets. And so I think that, first of all, Buffalo gives us a really unique angle because if we were think about it. If somebody tells you their brand is from Dallas or from LA or from Seattle, like it could be anything.
No identity.
But immediately with Buffalo, you think like hard work, grit, old America. It's a great city for us to be in as a heritage brand.
Sure.
You've seen brands like this succeed too. Like Shinola has done a great job of this within Detroit. And I think that the second half of the answer is probably really correlated to the fact that like, so my experience, you know, I don't think as a kid I thought about place very much. I think in Buffalo, like all you do is think about place. All you do is think about like Buffalo, what it means, and you know, because you're always thinking about, there's the sports teams and there's the snow and the national exposure. But like if it snows a lot in like, Batavia, it's not like Batavia gets on the national news, right? It's like, oh my God, look at this city. You know, what's happened to this, this town. But I think like the thing that I've come to love about Buffalo is that the innate qualities that you see as somebody who's hardy enough to live in a community like this are qualities that you would want in your business, right? Hard work, community, like neighborliness, right? Watching out for one another, like doing what's right. I know this is going to get bleeped out, but we say often that assholes don't survive in Buffalo. I'm sure you can think of a few, but nonetheless, the majority of assholes don't survive in Buffalo. And I think that as a company, when you think about, where we're at as a brand, like tomorrow I'm going to a trade show in Las Vegas. And, you meet people who run these brands from all over the world, and you want people to meet you and be like, I can trust these guys, right? I know that if I give them my budget and my trust to design something and make it and ship it, that they will do the right thing. And so to me, living in Buffalo for the past 20 years at this point, I know that if I need to borrow something from a neighbor, they'll be there. If I need somebody to shovel my walkway while on vacation, they'll do it, usually with a smile. And to me, those are qualities of living in Buffalo that I think translate perfectly to a business. Like I had a phone call with somebody very early on when we started this company. He ran a brand that I very much admire. And I was like, yes, sir, of course I can do that for you, sir. And then at the end of the call, I, showed my true cards. And I was like, what is your trick? How did you make your brand last as long as you have? And he goes, I credit the sustainability of my brand to two things. I've always done what I've said I'm going to do, and I always pay my bills. And I thought, I can do that. At the very least.
Yeah, aha moment.
Yeah. And so Buffalo's been a good town for us. And, right now we're recording this in January and it's cold outside and it's kind of gross. And you start to think like, how many years do you want to really be in Buffalo? Sure. But there's part of me that just thinks like, I kind of think I could do it. I could do it. Yeah. Give me my summers and I'll recharge my batteries. And I think I can keep powering through.
Right. And, for you guys too, something I was seeing was, a lot of companies take pride in being American made, right? Like you look at their manufacturing, or you look at the tag on the clothes or where the product and it says made in the USA, and that's something they pride themselves on. But you guys actually put made in Buffalo on the stuff you make. And I think that just goes back to kind of what you were saying was it's not just an American brand, it's like a Buffalo brand, right?
Yeah, I think same answer that I just gave. So just put that on a loop and just play it again. Right. But I think we really do sell product around the world. There are stores in Tokyo that carry our product. There are stores in, Denmark that carry our product. And so I love that we are ambassadors for this town. I'm really proud of it. And I think that what I've found is that when you have organizations that want to affiliate their org with yours, they want your story. Because otherwise it's just a triangular piece of fabric with a thing printed on it. But the story is so important. And just like Shinola did with Detroit, where it's like, we embody Detroit's toughness and their manufacturing spirit. So do we in Buffalo.
Right. And outside, actually, if you are at this space, you can see kind of a mural that's taken, I think it was back in 2019, you guys had put that up, and it's been pretty notable in the area. People come and take pictures with it, but it said, keep Buffalo a secret, which again, I think probably goes back to your marketing hat, you guys, and kind of the creativity with that. I'm not sure if you thought that it would maybe take off as much as it did, or maybe you had hoped it would, but kind of what was the thought behind that? Because, now everyone seems to use keep Buffalo a secret, but where did that come from? Was it just a random idea, or what's the inside kind of story on that?
I cannot remember exactly where the phrase came from, because it's not a mural, it's a sign, by the way.
Okay.
Like, that's disrespectful to muralists who actually put time in. We put a bunch of words on the side of a big building. The story of the sign is so much bigger than coming up with the phrase itself. Yeah. But I think at the time, I don't know, we were really feeling a sense of pride around this community. Mm-hmm. And I think particularly in that time, we were feeling a lot of honor that we got to represent the community. So the landlord of this building reached out to us. We're in the building right now.
Sure.
we weren't always occupants here. And he's like, I've got this building. I bought the old Art Voice building. I'm going to redo it. Side of the building is just begging for a mural. What do you want? You can do anything you want. And so we were kind of chuckling at the idea. And we're like, well, keep Buffalo a secret sounds good, right? Yeah. And the phrase kind of came out of that. But I remember, and a lot that was supposed to, at the time, connote like that you want to take it back, right? People always want to use Buffalo as a pejorative of some way, in some way. Like, it sucks. It's snowy. Right. Yeah, hate it. Bills are terrible. Yeah. So, I can keep going. But I think the idea was to take that back and to be like, those of us that live here like this place, right? And I've also like, I think it's a really cheap shot to make fun of a place where somebody lives, because every community in America has people who care about that place, who wake up trying to make it a better place, and for these boneheads to come into town and be like, oh, it's so ugly. It's like, we're working on it, man. Like we're trying here. Yeah. And so my personal experience with it was that I really liked the idea that we were taking it back and saying like, okay, you can say it. You can come in from, Dallas for a Bills game and watch your team get smoked and then go back to Dallas and drive by the airport and be like, yeah, it's an ugly town. Right. But those of us that live here know that it's a community that's worth fighting for. Right. I have a funny story about the mural. So we put the mural up and the sign.
Yeah, I was going to say, not a mural.
You call it a mural. You messed me up. I'm all twisted up on what it is. What is it? Where am I? And I knew the day that it was going up. It was going up in October. And I think we wanted to get it up. Like we had to get it up because it was going to get cold and the muralist didn't want to work, 40 feet in the air on a November day. So I remember it was kind of like, we were waiting for is it going to be dry enough for a couple of days? And when can we get up there? And we got the cherry picker and it went up and I kind of woke up in the morning and I was like, I get to go look at that thing today. We did it. We did it. So I woke up in the morning, they did it overnight. And I remember I pulled onto Main Street from Allen. I'm like, all right, here we go. And as soon as the building came into view, I was like, oh, that's really big. Yeah. I was like, oh no, it's really big. And what had happened was the muralist, the painter who did the sign, used a projector and just took our graphic and was like, I'll put it up, and didn't give us an opportunity to be like, is this too big? Yeah. So it was just put the projector way back there, and that's how it went on the side of the building, and that's how it went up. Right. But to this day, I'm still like, it's a little bigger than I wanted it. Yeah. I was hoping for it. It worked out.
Yeah. Something else too, you mentioned it briefly, but was having the Pennants during, COVID and the Bills run on the Seneca One Tower. Kind of like, how did that come to be a thing? And, that was I was reading it was unique because the way you already talked about the manufacturing behind the pennants and all that. But I was reading that the way you had to design that one was to allow for air to actually flow through it because they didn't want to blow off the building. Oh, yeah. So kind of like, how did that all become a thing there?
The story behind how it became a thing really is all credit to Doug Jamal and Sean Heidinger over at Seneca One. We had the idea. I knew that the M&T was moving their headquarters in because they just painted it, I think that summer. Yep. And I knew that there was just a blank space up there. And so Brett called up Sean and was like, we want to put a couple of flags up there. If we pay for it, can we do it? Yeah. And Sean's like, I got you. I'm figuring this out. Yeah. And a day later, he called us up and he's like, we think we can do it. Because they had all the infrastructure up there to get over on the side with the window cleaning apparatus is a rail at the top. So you could actually go on the side of the building. And so we worked with Ace Flag to get it made in Buffalo. Mm-hmm. Those guys helped us put it up. And it was really just one of those, that's a great Buffalo story, right? That's one of those things where hold on.
Everyone.
Beep, boop, beep, boop, beep. Yeah. All right, 20 minutes later, you've got the answer. Right. And it's a yes. Yeah. So they were expensive. I mean, each of those pennants cost us several $1,000s to have manufactured. Sure. But at the time, I think, so we were sponsoring the Bills, mm-hmm. and people were still inside for COVID. And so we had this kind of the Bills had made the playoffs, which was such a shining star in the midst of we're all trapped in our houses and it's January. And so we really liked the idea that because the community couldn't be together, that there would at least be something out there that people could drive by and feel that sense of community that you would typically feel, at kickoff when you're there with 70,000 people. So we thought we're better than the tallest building in Buffalo to just put that in all directions. Everyone can see it and everyone knows what it's for. We still have some downstairs. I think we have 2 of them. We gave one to the to Seneca, one I think we gave away in a raffle.
Yeah. And that's kind of, interesting too, because as you already talked about, that sense of community, so much of it is built behind the football team and kind of everything that, fans in this area, the Bills mean to them. So for you guys, having that relationship you did during that year when they went to the AFC Championship game, I know it started off kind of with the post-game flags or pennants that they were holding up that said the different clever sayings, and but they won a lot of games that year, so you guys had to make a lot of those. So kind of, was that a moment, I think, for you guys? I know you said it's not always like the pride in the relationships as much as it is the individual stories, but that one feels a little more close to home because of what this team means to this community.
So what's the question?
Am I on with that? Is it feel like it was that a bigger moment for you guys, or is it just another one of those where it was like we were always ready for that sort of thing?
No. I think it's really interesting because like I was thinking about this over the weekend at the Bills game, and I was thinking about like what it is that constantly draws me back to football. I think everybody has their own reason, and for me, it's like it's my mom, right? And my mom and I grew up watching football and watching the Bills. And when I go to the game, my mom texts and she's, "Are you there?" I'm like, "Yes, Mom, I'm here." My mom's 72, so she's like, "Are you there? Are you cold? Did you eat?" But it's not always the football, right? It really actually very little of it is the football. But I feel that we're very disconnected from one another now, and the phones, right? The phones, and you're in a car in the suburbs, and people go, drive their car into their garage, and they go inside for the rest of the night, and they get back in their car, and they drive to work, and you just don't get to see anybody. But when you're at a Bills or a Sabres game, you see all your neighbors. You see Buffalo, and you also see the diaspora, and especially at Bills games, because there's so many Sabres games. Like it's just Tuesday night, and they're playing the Kraken, and I guess I have tickets, and I guess I'll go. But at a Bills game, you go to games, and people are like, "Oh, I'm in from San Diego. I'm visiting my grandma," right? My grandpa used to live, we lived here, grew up Bills fans. I've lived in California for 40 years. And so I was always drawn to football as a marketing vessel because I felt like if we're a community-based company, you really can't get more bang for your buck either than working with like the NFL, right? But I've always loved that sense of like looking around and being like, oh, all these people are here. Right. Like they're in this town. They all live in those houses, right? And so I think that's what draws me to football, but it also reminds me of why I love this place. And whether the Bills win or of course I want the Bills to win, but whether they win or lose, I still feel that sense of connection. Just the knowing glance in the parking lot when they lose. Like you see the guy, you're like, I know.
So obviously we, at West Herr, we have this Team West Herr concept, and it's the name of the podcast, but it's, we work with some of the guys like Josh and Dion and Dawson, and Steve Tasker's been part of our, company for a long time. So, when we've been doing with this concept and flushing it out in different ways, we kind of came to you guys and we're looking for perhaps a way to further extend that brand a little bit. And you guys put together, so this is the mini pennant that we have here that you guys designed there. And then we have a really cool pin set with the guys' faces on them that are kind of like cartoon style that have really taken off. People love those. So, I know you mentioned that availability now, and as you guys have grown to customized products and things like that, but, for you guys, is it interesting when you get requests from like a local company like West Herr, who's, we're pretty rooted in this community, to be able to do something that almost ties the two worlds together, right? Because it's like the community of Western New York, but there's still that football flavor to it a little bit for that.
Yeah, I this is not a paid endorsement. Sure. I love West Herr. Yeah. And I will tell you that because I think Brett and I both love vehicles, I'll tell you, we've probably bought 5 vehicles from West Herr since we started this company. Sure. Bought our company truck here, bought a van from West Herr. I bought my car, my daily driver from West Herr. My wife did too. I think Brett's truck is from West Herr. We're constantly there. And for one reason or another, it just feels like vehicles are like a big part of what we want to do here. And the last vehicle that I bought my daily driver, and somebody from West Herr gave me a name tag. And they were like, I think it might have been on the marketing team. I got the name tag, and they're like, "Well, you're here all the time. Nice. So people need to know who you are." And I love that. Like, I'm not saying it just because I'm on this podcast, but I really appreciate I really appreciate how important community is, and the fact that like, it's for me, maybe as a business owner, it's different, but for me, it's like, this is my 7th car that I've bought in the last few years. And I roll up and you remembered. Right. And I still actually have the West Herr name tag above my desk. Awesome. I just think it was a really funny ploy. So what was the question?
No, you answered it. It was basically just in terms of the community aspect of West Herr, but also kind of the football side of it, how we kind of came together for that collaboration and kind of seeing it now as part of the West Herr brand a bit too with Oxford Pennant.
Absolutely. Yeah, very, very, I mean, I'm not just saying it, very proud to be a partner.
Yeah. And then, looking forward a little bit to, in terms of the products you guys offer now, because, I know it's Pennants, but you guys have done some other stuff here and there too. Overall, like big picture, when you're talking about production in a year and things like that, how many products are you guys producing? And when you come up with, I know Brett kind of handles, the creative department and things like that, but when you come up, like, what's the process for coming up with the new products or the new designs to go into all that?
Last year we did 250,000 units out of the company, which is a lot of units. I mean, it's a lot of sewing, it's a lot of flags, a lot of shipping, it's a lot of packing. I think we have to, it's year 11, right? Sure. And I think for a long time, there's still our best sellers at the company, like a phrase on a flag that makes somebody feel something, right? So we've got like our top performing flag is a flag. It's actually, Brett came up with the idea. Brett had a friend that got fired. And so he made him a flag that said, "You'll think of something," and mailed it to him just as a joke. And I remember it was probably 6-7 years ago. I'm like, that's like not just a funny joke. Right. I think that's actually something. And I think a lot of people feel that like, I'm stuck. I don't know what I'm going to do. Yeah. And that like, "you'll think of something" phrase very resonant with people. That was what we did for a very long time. Yeah. I think now, like I mentioned this earlier when we spoke, we hold ourselves to a pretty high standard in terms of product, and that isn't just about the manufacturing of the product. Right. I think we want to make sure that we're constantly pushing the envelope in terms of what this can be. And so I think we still like, it's Valentine's Day. Let's come up with some fun Valentine's Day products and, release those. That'll always be there. We're a company, like we have to come up with the Mother's Day promo. Right. But I think when people go to oxfordpennant.com and they see the different products that we make, I think you'll see that we're trying to pull from this creative reservoir of like all the vintage stuff that was ever made to create something that is new. Yeah. And so we keep, old catalogs from old flag companies, and we keep flash tattoo books, and we're constantly trying to draw inspiration from other elements of creativity, especially like handmade creativity, and pull it into this product in some way. And so, like I mentioned, this Disney collection that we have coming out, the Disney collection, of course, it's Mickey Mouse on a flag, of course, but there are elements of that draw from flash tattoos. There's elements of what we design that draw from flash tattoos, or that draw from vintage chain stitching, or like vintage hot rod design. Right. There are elements of what we put into the product that like they feel vintage, but like in the art as well as in the product. Okay. And so to me, I feel like, when we're designing a product, we try to make sure that we're drawing from like all the creativity that we admire, and not just like a logo slap on a flag. Sure.
And another piece to it that too, I think it comes back to the whole, personal element of the Oxford brand. But when you ship a product, like people open it and there's like a handwritten note inside. Was that something you guys like decided early on you wanted to add that element of like personalization?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Every Oxford order, save for maybe a handful when we get like super busy during the holidays, has had a signature on it, like an ink signature from the person that packed the order. The story's funny. I was telling you, like when we first started speaking, I was telling you about how my background was like in offset printing. I had this guy I used to work with who was getting ready to retire when I was working for him. So I think he's got to be pushing 80 at this point. He's around, but he was just this old school, like chain smoking. He's like, "Kid, you got to thank him," and just drove in the importance of making sure that you get multiple touches with people, and that, as an e-commerce brand, we've all had the experience, like the generic package shows up with the UPS label, and you open it up and it's like, yeah, there's my thing. Yeah. That's what I got, else, right?
No receipt.
Totally. And everything has been value engineered, right? It's the brown box because it's the same brown box for the lotion company that it is for the, car part company. It's all the same brown box. So I think like when you see generic things happening, it's an opportunity to differentiate. Sure. So like when we started developing the packaging design for the company, Brett and I just said, let's make sure that this is the most exciting thing that comes in the mail. Like it might not be the most exciting part of your day, but when it shows up, let's see, like somebody gets it and it's like, That's my pennant.
Right.
My Oxford pennant is there. Right. And so you open, the box has a, sorry.
No, you're
Sorry.
all good. You're all good.
The box has a, great design on it, tissue paper, handwritten note, product, usually a sticker or a pin, and all that for a $28 product, right? Or a $60 flag. I mentioned that Brett and I bonded over music. One of the things that Brett talked about early on when we were developing this packaging was how it used to feel to be like a fan of like a punk music magazine, right? And you'd get a subscription, but the magazine, this little zine would show up and it'd be black and white, and you'd open it up and it would have stickers and a postcard inside of it. And just all that like throwaway stuff it sort of makes you feel like you're in the club. Sure. Right? Yeah. Like, now I subscribe to Kerrang or whatever magazine. Right. And to me, I think that like, again, if you look at the company, if you really pay attention, you see the threads of punk rock and vintage manufacturing and hand-drawn design. All that comes together to be this really interesting, cosmic gumbo.
Right.
Of product.
And, and we talked about the building itself. So like we're in 810 Main Street now. Yeah. You had your other store like up the street, and now you've relocated into this building. Kind of what was the thought process? And I don't know if this is still the plan, but I think I read that you guys were planning to eventually build out like a store space in this building too, that would kind of show off the manufacturing side of it. So having everything all in one location now, kind of what was the thought behind that?
Exactly that. Yeah. I think, the having the old retail store was just a matter of circumstance, and it worked really well for us pre-COVID. And like when we closed up the store, we were, I said to the team when we announced to our company that we were planning on closing it, I said, like, we had 2 great years here and we had 3 weird years. Yeah. Because we were open from 2017, I think we signed the lease. 18 and 19 were great years. 2020 happens, and like then it's just you're open, and then you got to close for a week, but then the numbers go down, so you're open again, but people don't know the thing, and do you have to wear a mask? And so it sputtered, right? And I think we were like, well, then this concept is over, right? This particular iteration of the company represented at retail has to be done because it doesn't seem to work. Sure. And when I wrote my strategy document for 2023, the very top of it just said, we are manufacturers, right? And I think like we've successfully completed this tightrope act of being like flavor of the month Instagram brand, which we very much were, to like, all right, we took all those winnings and we turned into a real business, right? That, does a 401k match, all the real things that real businesses do. Right. And so it just didn't make sense that we had this building that everyone wants to see the chocolate factory. Sure. Everyone wants to see like the fun flag company and hear the punk rock music. And, I don't blame them for that, but we've never opened up our doors to the average person who can come in. So as we're starting to think about retail moving forward, we think like, well, let's show everybody what they want to see. Right. And so we're really starting to think of it through the lens of it being a factory store, right? A la LL Bean, right? Right. And you go in and you can obviously buy anything out of the catalog. But, on Saturdays between 12 and 2, you can get a tour. Right. And if there's nobody there, we just don't give the tour. Right. But I think we really like this idea that like we're this brand that's doing all this stuff and that we can show people that we are making it. Right. This is not like a thing in a piece of plastic that you buy at the store and you go and you use it and you throw it away. Right. These are real people. These are your neighbors that are making a consumer product that you can buy and have for 100 years. Right. 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 If you take care of it. So I want people to see what we've done, and I want people to be inspired by it, not just to buy the product, but to say, oh, I can make something. Right. I can do that too. Right. And long term, I would love to see us inspire a new community of makers in Buffalo.
That's awesome. And kind of wrapping up here, looking towards the future, I know you can't give away all the secrets because that stuff's, proprietary and things like that, but is there a plan in place for kind of, I know, and the answer is yes, I'm sure, but continuing to innovate, continuing to push the, forward the way you guys have to this point? It's not, when you've been around now, you said over, 11 years, it starts getting harder, I think, to continue to innovate because early on, it's like, well, we're all new and it's something different. But for you guys going forward in the future, you have new plans on the horizon for Oxford Pennant.
This product, who knows, but I don't think we'll ever make a play into apparel. Sure. So there's 47 brand, brand people are really familiar with. They were a Pennant company. Yep. And then I think one day somebody who was in my seat was like, this flag stuff is never going to turn us into billionaires.
Sure.
Let's get into apparel and hats. And you could still get a Pennant at the 47 store in Boston, but they really successfully pivoted. Yep. To me, I don't know. First of all, I'm ill-equipped to run $1 billion company. There'd be a lot more trucks on the lot. I'll tell you that much. But I don't think that we have like endless growth on the horizon. I think, people ask me from time to time, like, so what, 10 years of the little flag company, what's next? I would love for this to be the kind of company that I could, work at until I retire. I don't know if that's the case, but I would love to build that company. To me, like product innovation would require us to find new products, right? I mean, it is literally a flat piece of fabric, right? So what can you do? To me, the investment worth making is seeing how you can translate the aesthetic that we've already established and apply it to things that feel staid and tired. Sure. And if we do that successfully, we can take the Oxford thing and we could apply that to the NFL, right? Maybe we could apply it. We've already applied it to hockey. Right. All that is contingent upon having a partner that wants to see you innovate too. Sometimes they're like, know your role and don't do anything crazy. But I feel I could live 100 lifetimes and I couldn't create all the things that I want to create with this company. Yeah. So a lot of that is just playing whack-a-mole and making sure that we are like, what idea feels best, right? What idea makes us wake up in the morning and think, let's go to work. Right. Because I feel that way. Right. I feel that way every day because this is like, I've been doing this for 11 years for 365 days. Like literally, there's not a day that I haven't worked on Oxford since we started it, including my wedding day. Yep. Just a quick email check on.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know how that one went over.
It took me a while to get over that one. But, creating a company that inspires employees to wake up in the morning and be like, hell yeah. Let's do it. Yeah. Let's go. So that's the hard part, is making sure that the project, if you think of that in the big picture term, is the project stimulating enough to get 55 people to go, yes, we're in. Right. And that's my job.
And I think the last thing I just wanted to ask here, and I don't know, maybe it's not how you feel, but kind of in a sense, Buffalo, as we've talked a lot about already on the podcast, has become kind of tied to Oxford and Oxford to Buffalo. Do you ever feel a sense of like obligation to succeed because like you are so synonymous now with Buffalo and the upcoming, resurgence of the area, and then especially when you're tied into some of these bigger brands, like it's like, yeah, that's the Buffalo company that's doing that. Does that ever add any pressure, or is it just something you kind of try to like push aside and do your own thing while you're doing it? And maybe you've never, maybe no one's ever asked you that.
That's a good question.
Before.
I'm just thinking about what the real answer is. I think like anyone else, probably many people out there would love to see us fail. Right? Sure. Just they don't like me, or they don't like Brad, they don't like our thing, or they don't like the fact that we're doing what we do or whatever. I'm sure there are probably hundreds of people that would love to see us fail. And to them I say, I will never die. But I think for me, I want, what happens to me or the business, I think is inconsequential, because I think that our story, this business started with two like normal dudes from Buffalo who had a couple of drinks one night and were like, all right, screw it. Let's give it a try. Like it started just like anybody else in Buffalo could do tonight at any bar, right? Two people, anybody. And the result of all of that, when you're using your intuition, your know-how, your network, your friends, you call friends and ask them, I don't know how to do this. What do I do? A community rallies together to create a company that does, I think, amazing things. I don't know if the revenue number impresses anybody, but it impresses my mom, me, And so I think, do I feel pressure to succeed? The only reason that I would feel any pressure to succeed is because I would want anybody like us to look at this and be like, well, those idiots did it. We can try something, let's do a hot dog stand or something. Like if those guys can do it. And Buffalo is not this like barren business wasteland that some people think that it is. And I would hate to fail, because I think that it would show that like trying to do the right thing for your community, paying your employees a fair wage, plowing out their driveways when it snows, right? Making the investments that you make in a community, you try to prove that like the good guys can win. If you think of us as the good guys, like you want a company that doesn't screw people over to do well. And we've tried to embody that. And, you know, if we failed, I think it would be an indictment of that entire philosophy, you know? And so for that reason, I want the right way to do business to inspire other people to do things the right way. If you think that what we do is the right thing, and maybe you don't. But on top of all of that, I hope that people can look at Oxford and be inspired to try something for themselves that ultimately reinforces the, you know, undergirding of the community.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Well, thank you, Dave, for joining us today. It was really interesting to learn more about Oxford, and I'm excited to hopefully get like a quick tour of this place here.
Yeah.
But, you know, for everyone watching, thanks for tuning into another episode of the Team Wester podcast. Join us again soon. We'll be back this season, the off season, with some more guests coming up. But thank you, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon.